Hello children, today we'll be discussing a very important chapter from your textbook. The chapter is titled Nelson Mandela, A Long Walk to Freedom. Nelson Mandela is an important figure in the world history for his contribution towards his society. He spent 27 years as a political prisoner in South Africa before becoming the country's first black president. He was captured and jailed in 1962, and in 1964 he was convicted of treason and sentenced to life in prison. He began serving the sentence as prisoner number 46664 near Cape Town, but instead of disappearing from view, Mandela became a prison-bound martyr and worldwide symbol of resistance to racism. He was elected the country's president in 1994 and served until 1999. He remained a celebrated figure in South Africa and throughout the world until his death in 2013. His autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, was published in 1994. This chapter is an extract from the autobiography of Nelson Mandela. Excerpts from Long Walk to Freedom include description of the inauguration ceremony, citations from his speech, his journey to being a freedom fighter, the struggle, along with a tribute to other freedom fighters and countless other people who fought for their freedom. In South Africa, the practice of apartheid was followed and the dark-skinned people were deprived of their basic rights. This chapter gives us an overview as to how Nelson Mandela, along with others, carved their way to a society where they will be not discriminated on the basis of their color, caste, race, age, and gender. Nelson Mandela, after more than 3 centuries of white rule, celebrated very vividly the grand ceremony of the first democratic, non-racial government. Being sworn in, he said radiantly that never, never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by other. He pays homage to the freedom fighters like Oliver Tambo, Lithuli, Yusuf Dadoo, and others. They were men of uncommon courage, wisdom, and generosity. He regards the death of thousands of people who sacrificed their lives for the cause of courage. It's not the absence of fear, but the victory over it. No man is born with harassment, rather love, which comes natural to the human heart. He says, every man has his duties to his family, to the community, and to his country to perform honestly. Nelson Mandela swears in as the first black president of South Africa on 10th of May 1994. The swearing in ceremony took place in the lovely sandstone amphitheater in Pretoria. He addressed the rainbow gathering with a zest, telling that never, never, and never again should it be that the beautiful land would experience the oppression of one by another. He wished that freedom in Africa should reign. The army officials who could have and put them in jail before were saluting him to pay respect to the newly born democracy. The 2 national anthems were sung at the time of his swearing-in ceremony. He recalls back the history and pays homage to the national martyrs who sacrificed their lives for the sake of their motherland. He tells that the martyrs were the men of extraordinary courage and wisdom and generosity. The country of South Africa is rich in minerals and gems, but the greatest wealth of country is its people. He tells no one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin or his background or his religion. If people learn to hate, they can be taught to love too. He talks that man's goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never exhausted. He talks about the twin obligations, obligation towards his family and obligation towards his nation. While discharging his duties, he found he was not free. Hence, he joined African National Congress and fought for the freedom of his country. He knew that the oppressor must be liberated just as surely as the oppressed. The oppressor and the oppressed are likely to be robbed of their humanity alike. 10 May is an autumn day in South Africa. Because of this day, there was the largest gathering of international leaders on South African soil for the installation of South Africa's first democratic non-racial government. Mandela felt privileged to be the host of the nations of the world, because not too long ago the South Africans were considered outlaws. He thus thanked the international leaders for having come to witness his investiture as president, since this event could be considered as a common victory for justice, peace and human dignity. Mandela had high hopes for the future of South Africa. He pledged to liberate all South Africans from the continuing bondage of poverty, deprivation, suffering, gender and other discrimination. He also stressed that the beautiful land of South Africa would never ever experience racial discrimination again. The highest military generals of South African Defence Force and police saluted Mandela and pledged their loyalty. When the military general saluted Mandela, he was not unmindful of the fact that not too many years ago they would have not saluted him but arrested him. This change in attitude was due to the fact that a new non-racial government was elected and Mandela was the president of South Africa. On the day of the inauguration, two national anthems were sung, one by the whites and the other by the blacks. This symbolized the equality of blacks and whites. On seeing men stand up to attacks and torture without breaking and thus showing strength and resilience that defied the imagination, Mandela learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. This chapter has a very beautiful message. Mandela mentions that every man has twin obligations. The first is to his family, parents, wife and children. The second obligation is to his people, his community and his country. He does not feel that the oppressor is free because according to him, an oppressor is a prisoner of hatred who is locked behind the bars of prejudice and narrow-mindedness. He feels that both the oppressor and the oppressed are robbed of their humanity. As a boy, he did not have a hunger to be free as he thought that he was born free. As long as he obeyed his father and abided by the customs of his tribe, he was free in every way he knew. As a student, he wanted certain transitory freedoms only for himself, such as being able to stay out at night, read what he pleased and go where he chose. He then talks about certain basic honorable freedoms, such as achieving his potential of earning his living and of marrying and having a family. He builds the contrast between these two freedoms by stating that the transitory freedoms he wanted were limited to him, whereas the honorable freedoms had to do more with his and his people's position in the society. Before he became the president, South Africa was in the grips of apartheid and was thus declared an outlaw by other nations. When he became the president, he abolished apartheid and thus diplomatic relations were rebuilt with many countries. When Mandela says that he was simply the sum of all African patriots, he means that he could identify with the unimaginable sacrifices of all those noble and courageous men who fought for the collective freedom of the African people. He was pained that he could not thank them and that they could not see what their sacrifices have wrought. Mandela realized in his youth that it was not just his freedom that was being curtailed, but the freedom of all blacks. The hunger for his own freedom became the hunger for the freedom of his people. The desire of a non-racial society transformed him into a virtuous and self-sacrificing man. Thank you very much, children.